Welcome to Lead. We're talking about maturity in the life of a leader. And I want to tell you that all of us should have a desire to grow and to improve and develop and become mature. I think most people do. I think most people look at their life and say, hey, there's an area where I'm not where I need to be, because maturity, well, it's levels and it's expanded this way and that way. It's not just here. Well, it's all over our life in many areas. And I thought about, I'm a big Colts fan, love the Colts, love it when they're winning. I mean, you love it when your team wins. And we don't want Colts to be count on losing this Sunday. We want them to win. And so in a kind of a bold move, just recently, right before we recorded this, just this week, the head coach was released, fired, and they brought in a new guy. A new guy is a former Colts player, Jeff Saturday, center, has been out of the game for a little bit as far as a player, but is just a Super Bowl winner and just incredible guy. And he's been coaching high school football. And so the question is, when they bring him in, is he ready for this? He's not a college coach. He's not an NFL coach. He's a guy that's coached high school football. He's just an interim coach. He's not the coach they're going to count on forever. But is he ready? Is he ready for the big league? Is he ready for professional football to coach a NFL team? Is he ready? Is he mature enough? And Ephesians 6:15, we've been spending some time in spiritual armor, because we think that and believe this, that a mature leader would be one that has the right armor, is armed properly. In Ephesians 6:15, it says this, and having your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Having covered your feet, put on shoes, and the shoes being the readiness of the gospel of peace, of the good news of peace. And the Amplified Bible says it this way, are you ready to face the enemy with a firm-footed stability? Stability. And I think when you think about shoes in reference to armor, I don't know if seems like a big deal. We think of the sword, we think of the shield, the helmet, the breastplate, shoes. You're going to go into battle, is shoes that big a deal? Well, they are, because if you can't stand up straight, if you're slipping all the time, well, you're not ready to do armor. If the enemy can get you to slip up somewhere, right? If he can get you to be deceived, discouraged, depressed, well, he can do a lot of damage in your life. And so insignificant in some ways shoes are, but yet very important, very important. I thought about how that shoes definitely, we could slip with the wrong ones. We could not have a sure-footed stance. A lot of things that could happen. And then I thought about that's a part of being ready, being prepared. Being prepared. How are we prepared? With the good news, the gospel of peace. I thought about a story that was told by a missionary Vietnam, Scott Fontenot. And he talks about Rene, a guy that he met there. Rene was a guy that had served 2 diplomats as a bodyguard during the Vietnam War. And then what had happened was, during a bombing, one of them was injured, and Rene, as a bodyguard, trying to protect him, was injured as well. And that diplomat said, listen, I want him in the same hospital as me. I want him to receive the same care, because he tried to save my life and protect me. And so he gets in there, and then in 1975 in Saigon, when everything's kind of falling apart and Americans are exiting, well, Rene wants to get him and his family out of there as well, but he's left behind. And a few days after that, the North Vietnamese arrest him on charges that he's a part of U.S. intelligence, and for 6 years he's in prison, tortured. Just a bad scene for Rene there in the prison that he's in of the North Vietnamese, the communists there. And he gets out. When he gets out, what he finds out is that his wife has left him, and he's devastated by that. But not only that, his kids try to escape Vietnam, and in the vessel that they're in the river, They are discovered, and it's sunken. And he and his family, his other parts of his family, watch, and they're not allowed to try to save his children. And his children all die. And so he's devastated. He's been through torture and pain, and so Rene is dealing with all of this. And so the opium dens that are popping up in his neighborhood, he visits them, and for a 10-year long journey, he just goes into a dream world with opium. His life becomes just entrenched in opium and in almost a fantasy world. His hair grows long, it's matted, it's dirty. He's got the grime of the streets on him. His fingernails are yellowed and turned back into his palms. He will often be seen out in the streets yelling at unseen voices. To look in his eyes is to look into an abyss of torture and pain and hatred. He's snapped and he's went into this dream world. And that's when this missionary, Scott, him and a couple of his friends see him. And they see him, and the three being committed Christians, they began to pray and fast for him. 2 days later, they invite him to a church service. Rene goes. During a time of prayer, he begins to have an episode of writhing and screaming out. And they, this group that is praying, they begin to command these spirits that's controlling him to leave one by one, 10 in total. And when he's set free and delivered from that, Scott in his right mind, Rene in his right mind begins to pray. And he accepts Christ as deliverer and savior and healer. And in a totally different realm now, Rene his mind has been set free. And he now, at this point, he now has this ability to receive the peace that the gospel brings. You know, when Paul, the Apostle Paul, writes and says, have your feet covered with the readiness, with the preparation of the gospel of peace. The gospel is peace. Rene received peace that the world can't give. It's much like the man that we read about in Gadara, when Jesus says to him, identify what this spirit is. It says, Legion, for we are many. And Jesus sets him free, and he's seated before Jesus in his right mind with peace. Peace means this. Shalom means nothing lacking. And that's what the gospel does for us. To have the readiness that for anyone that requests, that we have this good news that brings shalom peace, nothing lacking, that everything's put back together for your life. That we truly do give an answer for the hope that we have. And I think understanding this, that maturity, is two Greek words used to know. One of them is gnosko, the idea of being aware of, being informed, being acquainted with, of knowing stuff. And that's a great place. But there's another one, oida, which means to fully perceive, to understand through experience. Well, anyone that's listening or viewing me right now would know that oida is the better kind of knowing. And maturity means that I'm allowing God to move me through the experience, and because of that, I've chosen to be ready, to be prepared, so that the gospel of peace is what people can receive out of the maturity that God has given me. And I want to tell you this, that when you put on those shoes, and it's a process, just like this morning, when you got up and you got ready, being ready meant you didn't walk out of the house barefooted. You didn't show up at your place of business. You didn't show up at school. That'd be a nightmare dream, that you went to school with no shoes on. No, you put your shoes on because that was a part of being ready. In the adult world, we wear shoes. Maybe a toddler could go around with no shoes, but in the adult world, because that's a sign of maturity, it means we're ready. Ready with what? Ready with the gospel of peace. There's people that are lost and dying in our world who need Jesus, who need the good news of peace, that there can be a life where Nothing is lacking because He supplies all. And we could get distracted in knowing some stuff and miss out on the idea that I need to be fully, fully perceiving, understanding the experience that God has. And in that will I become ready. I become a person who my feet is covered, shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. I encourage you, be mature, get the gospel of peace on every place that you travel to. And your world and others will be different.